My wife demanded I apologize to her male best friend after I caught them flirting in 3 a.m. text messages. When I called him on speaker, he asked, "Is the dumbass asleep yet?" and exposed their months-long affair that destroyed our marriage. The emergency call that shattered my marriage came at exactly 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning when I stumbled to the bathroom half asleep and noticed the blue glow emanating from Victoria's phone on our nightstand. I'm not usually the suspicious type. Honestly, never had time for that kind of drama in my 8-year relationship. But something about the constant buzzing and vibrating made my stomach twist like I'd swallowed broken glass. Call it male intuition or just plain paranoia. But when your wife's phone is lighting up like a Christmas tree at 3 in the morning while she's supposedly sound asleep beside you, you don't just roll over and count sheep until dawn breaks through your bedroom windows. The messages flooding her screen were all from Diego, her so-called childhood best friend from high school, who had recently moved back to our city after his messy divorce from his college sweetheart. You know the type, the guy who always seemed to find convenient excuses to text her during our romantic dinner dates, who would show up at our house unannounced with expensive coffee from that boutique place downtown just because he was thinking about her, and who somehow always knew her work schedule and personal appointments better than I did after living with her for 3 years. The same Diego who had this annoying habit of calling her beautiful every chance he got and making inside jokes that deliberately excluded me from their conversations during family gatherings and social events. "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow night, gorgeous," followed by 3 kissing face emojis that made my blood run cold. "Nathan's working late again, isn't he? You looked absolutely stunning in that red sundress at lunch yesterday. Couldn't stop thinking about how perfect you looked." Each message felt like a physical punch to my solar plexus, and trust me, I'd experienced plenty of those during my amateur boxing days in college. But this emotional devastation hurt worse than any physical blow I'd ever received from an opponent in the ring. The casual way he mentioned my work schedule, the intimate compliments about her appearance, the obvious planning of secret meetups while I was supposedly oblivious to their growing connection. When Victoria woke up the next morning around 7:30, stretching and yawning like she didn't have a single care in the world or any guilty conscience weighing on her mind, I was already sitting in our kitchen nook with her phone placed directly in front of me on the granite countertop. The evidence was right there, glowing like a neon sign advertising her betrayal in downtown Las Vegas, impossible to ignore or rationalize away as innocent friendship. "Morning, sweetheart," she chirped cheerfully, while reaching for her favorite ceramic coffee mug, the one with the little sunflowers that we'd bought together during our anniversary trip to Tuscany 2 summers ago. "You're up surprisingly early today. Did you sleep okay? We need to have a serious conversation," I said calmly, sliding her phone across the smooth surface of our breakfast table. Her face went through more dramatic color changes than a mood ring exposed to extreme temperatures, first draining to an ashen pale, then flushing bright red with what I assumed was embarrassment, then back to ghostly white again as the reality of being caught hit her like a freight train. But instead of the tearful confession I expected, instead of the heartfelt apologies and desperate pleas for forgiveness that I thought would naturally follow such overwhelming evidence of emotional infidelity, you know what she did? She immediately went on the offensive like a cornered animal protecting her territory from a perceived threat. "You went through my personal phone without my permission," her voice pitched higher than a dog whistle trying to summon every canine in a 3-block radius. "Nathan, how could you possibly violate my privacy like that? I trusted you to respect my personal boundaries, and you completely betrayed that trust by snooping through my private conversations with my friends." Violate her privacy? I'm literally staring at concrete evidence that my wife of 3 years had been conducting some kind of emotional affair with another man, planning secret rendezvous behind my back, and she was seriously concerned about her privacy rights being infringed upon by her own husband, discovering the truth about her deceptive behavior. Sometimes I genuinely wonder if people take advanced courses on how to flip scripts this dramatically and effectively because Victoria's performance was worthy of an Academy Award nomination. "These text messages are completely innocent between old friends," she snapped defensively, while snatching the phone back from my hands with lightning speed. "Diego is my oldest friend, practically like a brother to me since we were teenagers. You're being ridiculously paranoid and unreasonably jealous, just like you always become whenever I maintain friendships with other people, especially male friends who knew me before we got together, just like I always become." That accusation stung worse than a swarm of angry hornets because it was completely fabricated and utterly false. I'd never been the controlling or jealous type in any relationship throughout my entire adult life. Hell, I'd been the one constantly encouraging her to maintain all her friendships and social connections, even when Diego started getting uncomfortably familiar around our house, borrowing our Netflix password, helping himself to food from our refrigerator, and staying for dinner without being specifically invited to join us for our evening meals together as a couple. "Innocent?" I repeated, my voice probably sounding as hollow and defeated as I felt inside my chest. "Victoria, he's calling you gorgeous at midnight, commenting on your physical appearance in intimate detail, and casually discussing my work schedule like he's planning something secretive around my absence. These messages clearly indicate that you two have been meeting privately while I'm at the office earning money to support our household expenses and future plans together." Her hands were visibly shaking as she poured coffee into her mug, the ceramic clinking against the coffee pot in a nervous rhythm that betrayed her supposedly calm exterior demeanor. "You're reading way too much into completely normal friendly banter," she insisted, but her defensive body language and trembling fingers suggested otherwise. "Diego has always been naturally flirtatious in his communication style. That's just his personality, how he talks to everyone, including his sister and female coworkers, and basically every woman he encounters in his daily life. It doesn't mean anything romantic or inappropriate is happening between us. Right, because every platonic male friend tells all his buddies' wives that he can't stop thinking about their dresses and physical appearance. That makes perfect perfect logical sense and happens all the time in healthy marriages. But here's where the story takes a turn that would make professional poker players jealous of Victoria's audacious bluffing skills. She didn't just defend those inappropriate messages and dismiss my legitimate concerns about boundary violations. She doubled down in a way that demonstrated either complete delusion or masterful manipulation tactics. "You know what you need to do right now," she announced, crossing her arms and giving me that stern look. The same expression she used when I forgot to take out the garbage on collection day. "You need to call Diego immediately and apologize for being suspicious and paranoid about his friendship with me." I blinked once, twice, 3 times, wondering if I'd somehow entered an alternate dimension where logic and reason no longer applied to human relationships. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" My brain was struggling to process the sheer audacity of her demand that I apologize to the man who was obviously trying to seduce my wife behind my back while making jokes about my supposed ignorance of their growing emotional connection and planned secret meetings. "You need to pick up that phone right now and call Diego to apologize for being irrationally suspicious and unfairly paranoid," she repeated, with that authoritative edge in her voice, the tone that meant she'd already decided exactly how this conversation was going to conclude. "He's been nothing but a loyal and supportive friend to both of us throughout our entire relationship, and you're treating him like some kind of predatory criminal just because he's maintained a close friendship with me since high school. Prove to me that you actually trust our marriage and respect my friendships by calling him immediately and saying you're sorry for doubting his intentions." The audacity was almost impressive in its complete disconnect from reality. Almost. But you know what they say about handling crazy situations? Sometimes the most effective approach is to lean directly into the madness and let people dig their own graves deeper while you watch from a safe distance. Sometimes you have to allow individuals to expose their true colors through their own choices and actions rather than trying to argue them out of their delusional positions. I looked directly at my wife, this woman I'd loved unconditionally for 8 years, married for 3, trusted with every secret and vulnerable moment, and slowly nodded my head. "You're absolutely right," I said, reaching for her phone with deliberate calmness. "I am being completely paranoid about innocent friendship. I should definitely apologize to Diego for questioning his pure intentions toward my wife." Relief flooded Victoria's face like water rushing through a broken dam, probably thinking she'd successfully manipulated me into accepting her version of reality, where clandestine meetings and flirtatious texting were perfectly normal married behavior. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said with genuine gratitude in her voice. "I knew you'd eventually come around and see reason once you calmed down from your initial emotional reaction. This is exactly why I love you so much, because you're mature enough to admit when you've made a mistake and strong enough to apologize when you've wronged someone who didn't deserve your suspicion." She settled back comfortably in her kitchen chair with a satisfied smile, probably already composing the story she'd tell Diego about her paranoid, jealous husband and how she'd expertly managed the situation to protect their special friendship from my unreasonable interference. I dialed Diego's number and activated the speaker function, setting the phone down on our granite countertop between us. Victoria watched approvingly as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. This was her moment of vindication, her opportunity to prove that I'd been completely wrong about Diego's intentions and her own behavior. She was probably imagining how surprised and hurt Diego would sound when he learned about my accusations, how he'd reassure us both that his friendship with Victoria was entirely platonic and respectful of our marriage boundaries. "Hey there, beautiful." Diego's voice filled our kitchen like poisonous gas seeping through ventilation systems. "Is the clueless bastard finally asleep yet? I've been thinking about you all morning since our coffee date yesterday. We should definitely sneak out together tonight like we did last weekend when he was working that overtime shift. I can't wait to get you alone again so we can continue where we left off in my apartment." The silence that followed was the kind you could cut with a sharp knife and serve at a dinner party. Victoria's coffee mug slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers and shattered against our kitchen floor, hot brown liquid spreading across the tile like her lies finally coming to light after months of careful deception. You could have heard a feather drop in that kitchen, the only sound being Diego's voice continuing through the speaker, completely oblivious to the nuclear bomb he'd just detonated on his own head and my marriage simultaneously. "Victoria, are you still there, gorgeous? Your husband didn't somehow catch on to our little arrangement, did he? The guy's so pathetically trusting and naive. It's almost sad watching him work late every night while we're together. Anyway, wear that black cocktail dress tonight. You know, the one that drives me absolutely crazy. I can't wait to finally get my hands on you properly without having to worry about that fool coming home early from his job." I looked directly at my wife, really looked at her for what felt like the first time in months. The woman I'd been prepared to apologize to was sitting there with her mouth hanging open like a fish gasping for air, all color completely drained from her face, as if someone had opened a valve and let her life force pour out onto our kitchen floor along with the spilled coffee. Here was my devoted wife, my trusted partner, my supposed best friend and confidant, caught red-handed in an affair that had apparently been going on for weeks or possibly months while I worked extra hours to save money for the house renovation she'd been requesting. "Here's your apology call," I said calmly, sliding the phone back across the table toward her trembling hands. Diego was still talking enthusiastically through the speaker, completely unaware that his cover had been blown and his secret relationship exposed. "Victoria, hello? Did you accidentally butt dial me? Either way, I'm already getting excited thinking about tonight. That hotel room I booked has a jacuzzi, and I brought that expensive champagne you mentioned loving. We're going to have the perfect romantic evening while your pathetic husband thinks you're visiting your sick grandmother in Phoenix." Victoria fumbled desperately for the phone and ended the call, but the devastating damage was already done. The words were hanging in our kitchen air like smoke from a house fire that had already burned everything valuable to the ground. Every secret meetup, every lie about working late, every fake fake story about visiting relatives or attending book club meetings, all of it was exposed in one catastrophic phone conversation that she demanded I make to prove my trust in their innocent friendship. Nathan, please let me explain, she began with tears streaming down her face, the kind of genuine emotional breakdown that might have worked on me a week ago, a day ago, even an hour earlier. But discovering your spouse has been systematically cheating on you while manipulating you into feeling guilty for suspecting the truth has a way of permanently changing your perspective on tears and dramatic emotional displays. It's not what you think. We haven't actually done anything physical yet. It's just been emotional support and companionship. Diego understands me in ways that you don't always seem to, and I was confused about my feelings. Just emotional support and companionship? Right, because that's exactly what innocent people do. Book hotel rooms with jacuzzis and discuss getting their hands on each other while calling their friend's spouse a pathetic fool. The lies kept flowing from her mouth like water from a broken faucet, each explanation more ridiculous than the last, each excuse more insulting to my intelligence and dignity as her supposedly beloved husband. Where did you go last weekend when you said you were helping your sister move furniture? I asked with surprising calmness, though inside I felt like a volcano preparing to erupt. My emotional control was hanging by the thinnest possible thread, and I could feel years of trust and love crumbling into dust around my feet, like an ancient building finally succumbing to time and neglect. More tears, more desperate sobbing that shook her entire body. We just went for dinner, and then walked around the waterfront district downtown. We talked about our problems, about how you and I have been growing distant lately, about whether I was really happy in this marriage, or just going through the motions, because it felt safe and familiar. She was trying to rewrite history, making her affair sound like marriage counseling instead of betrayal, turning her deception into some kind of therapeutic journey of self-discovery rather than a calculated decision to cheat on her husband. But here's the thing about betrayal that changes you fundamentally as a human being. It doesn't just hurt your heart, it rewires your entire brain and transforms how you view reality and relationships. Standing in that kitchen surrounded by broken ceramic and shattered promises, something cold and calculating awakened inside me, replacing the trusting, naive man who'd been manipulated for months without even realizing it. The emotional pain was definitely there, cutting through me like a rusty knife, but underneath that agony was something else entirely, something focused and determined and completely done with being anyone's fool. You're absolutely right, I said again, and hope flickered briefly in her tearful eyes like a candle flame in a hurricane. We have been growing distant lately, and I can understand why you might feel emotionally neglected and seek support elsewhere. This is clearly my fault for not being attentive enough to your needs as my wife. Victoria looked cautiously optimistic, probably thinking she'd successfully shifted the blame onto me and avoided the worst consequences of her choices. We can fix this relationship, Nathan, she said eagerly, reaching across the table to grab my hands with her trembling fingers. We can go to couples counseling, take that romantic vacation we've been discussing, maybe even renew our wedding vows to show our commitment to making this marriage work. I'll stop all contact with Diego immediately if that's what you need me to do to earn back your trust and prove that you're the only man I want in my life. I nodded thoughtfully and pulled her into what she probably thought was a reconciliation hug. She melted against my chest, no doubt believing she'd dodged the biggest bullet of her entire life and somehow convinced me to take responsibility for her affair. I love you so much, Nathan, she whispered against my shirt. I'm so sorry for everything. This whole situation with Diego didn't mean anything real. It was just a mistake, a moment of weakness and confusion that got out of hand before I realized what was happening. It's okay, I whispered back, stroking her hair gently. We'll definitely figure this out together. I forgive you completely. And in that moment, I meant every word, because I was about to give Victoria exactly what she'd been asking for through her actions, even if she didn't realize it yet. See, Victoria had made one crucial miscalculation in this entire situation. She'd assumed I was still the same trusting, naive husband who'd married her, the same guy who'd never question her late nights or suspicious phone calls, who'd believe any story she told him and apologize for his own reasonable concerns about her behavior. But betrayal has an interesting way of opening your eyes to patterns you'd been blind to for months or even years, like how she'd been working late significantly more often recently, always on nights when Diego happened to be free, or how she'd suddenly become passionate about yoga classes that seemed to occur at the most convenient times for clandestine meetings, or how she'd started caring much more about her physical appearance, buying expensive new clothes and spending extra time on makeup and hair for supposedly casual errands around town. The warning signs had been everywhere, scattered around our relationship like breadcrumbs leading to the truth. I'd just been too stupid, too trusting, or too busy with work to connect the obvious dots that spelled out my wife's systematic betrayal. But now that my eyes were open, I was paying very close attention to every detail, every word, every micro-expression on her face as she continued spinning her web of lies and manipulations. That evening, Victoria made my favorite dinner from scratch, homemade lasagna with garlic bread and Caesar salad, and we watched a romantic comedy together on our living room couch with her head resting on my shoulder like nothing had changed between us. To any outside observer, we probably looked like a happily married couple working through minor relationship difficulties with love and understanding. And in a way, that's exactly what we were doing, just not in the way Victoria imagined or hoped. While she slept peacefully beside me that night, probably dreaming about how cleverly she'd handled the crisis and maintained her double life, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and making plans. First, I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. How long had this affair been happening? How far had it actually progressed beyond emotional intimacy? What did Victoria really want from this situation? To fix our marriage or to have her cake and eat it too while keeping me as emotional and financial security? The next few days were among the most challenging of my entire adult life, pretending everything was normal normal and healthy between us, while internally processing the fact that my wife had been systematically lying to my face for months. Have you ever tried maintaining a cheerful demeanor when your entire world is collapsing around you? It's like attempting to smile genuinely while someone extracts your teeth with rusty pliers, requiring acting skills that would impress professional theater performers. But I managed the performance because I needed information, and rushing into angry confrontations would only give Victoria time to delete evidence, coordinate stories with Diego, and potentially disappear with half our shared assets before I could protect myself legally. Better to let her think she'd successfully manipulated me into accepting her version of reality, while I quietly gathered the facts necessary to make informed decisions about our future together. 3 days after the speakerphone revelation, Victoria came home from work with that guilty expression she probably thought looked casual and innocent. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, avoiding direct eye contact while fidgeting with her car keys. "I need to visit my grandmother in Phoenix this weekend. She's been having some health issues, and my mom thinks I should spend time with her while I still can. I might need to stay until Monday depending on how she's feeling." Her grandmother in Phoenix, the same cover story Diego had mentioned during his accidentally revealing phone call. The audacity was almost artistic in its boldness. "That sounds important," I replied supportively, kissing her forehead like a loving, trusting husband. "Give her my love, and don't worry about anything here. I'll probably just catch up on some work projects and maybe organize the garage like you've been requesting." Victoria practically glowed with relief and satisfaction, probably thinking she'd successfully maintained her deception while planning another romantic weekend with her affair partner. She spent Friday evening packing carefully selected outfits, including several items I'd never seen her wear for our own date nights. And Saturday morning, she drove away with a cheerful wave and promises to call me every evening to check in from her grandmother's bedside. I waited exactly 30 minutes after she left before beginning my own weekend activities, which involves significantly more detective work than garage organization. First stop was our cell phone company's office, where I requested detailed records of Victoria's calls and text messages over the previous 3 months. The customer service representative was initially hesitant until I explained that I was the primary account holder investigating potential identity theft or unauthorized usage on my wife's line. The phone records painted a crystal clear picture that was even worse than I'd suspected. Hundreds of text messages to Diego's number, many sent during times when Victoria was supposedly working late or attending various social commitments. Hours of phone calls, frequently occurring when she'd excuse herself for bathroom breaks or step outside for fresh air during our evening conversations. The digital paper trail documented a systematic pattern of deception that had been going on for at least 4 months, possibly longer. But the financial records told an even more devastating story. Our joint credit card statements revealed expensive restaurant dinners I'd never attended, boutique hotel charges from last weekend when she'd supposedly been helping her sister, multiple purchases at lingerie stores during her lunch breaks, and various other romantic expenses that had nothing to do with our marriage. Victoria had been conducting a full-scale affair using our shared money while lying directly to my face about working late and visiting family members. Armed with this concrete evidence, I spent Saturday afternoon consulting with a highly recommended divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving adultery and financial deception. The lawyer explained my legal options, helped me understand how to protect our shared assets during the separation process, and advised me on the best strategies for documenting Victoria's infidelity without violating any privacy laws or engaging in illegal surveillance activities. Sunday evening, Victoria called as promised from her supposedly sick grandmother's bedside, her voice filled with fake concern and artificial emotion. "Grandma's doing a bit better today," she reported, probably lying naked in Diego's hotel bed. "But I think I should stay until Tuesday to make sure she's really stable. You understand, right? Family comes first, and I'd never forgive myself if something happened while I was away." "Of course," I replied sympathetically. "Take all the time you need with your family. Grandma's lucky to have someone who cares about her as much as you do." The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast and serve it for breakfast. But Victoria was too absorbed in her deception to notice the subtle sarcasm in my supportive response. Tuesday afternoon, Victoria returned home glowing with what she probably thought looked like the satisfaction of helping a sick relative, but which I now recognized as the afterglow of a romantic weekend with her affair partner. "How's Grandma doing?" I asked, while helping carry her suitcase upstairs to our bedroom, noting that it seemed heavier than when she'd left, probably filled with new lingerie and other gifts from Diego. "Much better," Victoria replied easily, the lies flowing from her mouth like water from a tap. She was so grateful that I could spend time with her. It really made me appreciate how important family relationships are and how we should never take the people we love for granted. The psychological manipulation was masterful, turning her weekend of adultery into a touching story about family values while implicitly criticizing me for not appreciating her properly. That evening over dinner, Victoria launched into an elaborate performance about her weekend at her grandmother's bedside, complete with touching details about holding the elderly woman's hand and discussing life lessons about marriage and commitment. She was either a naturally gifted storyteller or had spent considerable time rehearsing her cover story because the fictional details were remarkably consistent and emotionally compelling. "Grandma told me that marriage is work," Victoria said earnestly, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "She said that sometimes people grow apart without meaning to, and it takes conscious effort from both partners to maintain that special connection. I've been thinking about us, Nathan, about how we can make sure we don't lose what we have together." The audacity of receiving marriage advice from her affair partner and then presenting it as wisdom from her grandmother was almost impressive in its complete shamelessness. But here's what Victoria didn't know while she was spinning her elaborate web of lies and manipulations. I'd spent her absence preparing for the conversation that would finally expose the truth and end our marriage permanently. The divorce papers were already prepared and waiting in my lawyer's office. Our joint bank accounts had been been quietly separated to prevent her from draining our shared savings during the inevitable drama that would follow. Most importantly, I documented every lie, every deception, every financial betrayal, with photographic evidence that would make any legal proceeding straightforward and definitive. You're absolutely right about marriage requiring effort from both partners, I agreed, nodding thoughtfully. I've been doing some thinking of my own this weekend, actually, about trust, honesty, communication, all the things that make relationships work. Victoria looked pleased, probably thinking her manipulation tactics were successfully steering me toward taking more responsibility for our marital problems while she continued her affair without consequences. What kind of thinking? She asked with genuine curiosity, leaning forward attentively like we were having a meaningful heart-to-heart conversation about our future together. She was completely confident in her ability to control the narrative and manage my perceptions, having successfully deceived me for months without arousing serious suspicion until Diego's accidental phone confession. I've been thinking about how relationships change when one person starts lying to the other, I said calmly, pulling out my phone and opening the folder where I'd saved screenshots of our credit card statements. Like how expensive restaurant dinners appear on our shared account during times when I'm working late and you're supposedly visiting sick relatives or attending book club meetings that don't actually exist, according to your friend Sarah. The color drained from Victoria's face faster than water down a drain, and her fork clattered against her plate with a sound like breaking glass. She stared at the phone screen showing evidence of her secret dinner dates with Diego while her mouth opened and closed silently like a fish struggling for oxygen in a rapidly emptying tank. Nathan, I can explain those charges, she began desperately, but I held up my hand to stop her before she could launch into another elaborate fictional narrative designed to make me question my own perception of reality and documented evidence of her systematic betrayal. You can explain 4 months of secret restaurant dinners, hotel charges, lingerie purchases, and romantic gifts that had nothing to do with our marriage? I asked, scrolling through page after page of financial evidence while she sat there realizing that her carefully constructed house of lies was collapsing around her. You can explain hundreds of text messages and hours of phone calls to Diego during times when you were supposedly focused on our relationship and working on our marital problems? Victoria started crying then, real tears this time, but they were tears of panic and fear rather than genuine remorse for her choices and their impact on our marriage. She wasn't sorry for betraying me, lying to me, or stealing our money to fund her affair. She was sorry for getting caught, sorry that her manipulations had finally been exposed, sorry that she might actually face consequences for her systematic deception and emotional abuse. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, she sobbed, reaching across the table toward my hands, which I pulled away before she could touch me. I love you, Nathan. I never stopped loving you. Diego was he made me feel appreciated and desired in ways that I hadn't felt in our relationship lately. It wasn't about replacing you. It was about filling a void that I didn't know how to address directly. There it was again, the attempt to make her affair my fault for not making her feel sufficiently appreciated, as if my failure to constantly validate her worth somehow justified months of systematic betrayal and financial theft. The psychological manipulation was textbook narcissistic behavior, deflecting responsibility while positioning herself as the victim of circumstances beyond her control. Victoria, I want you to pack your belongings and leave our house tonight, I said, with a calmness that surprised even me, considering the emotional tornado raging inside my chest. The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow morning. You can communicate with me through my attorney from now on. Her tears instantly transformed into desperate pleading, promises of immediate change, offers to attend counseling, threats of suicide if I didn't give her another chance to prove her love and commitment. But trust, once shattered by systematic deception, isn't something you can repair with tears and dramatic promises. Victoria had made her choice every single day for 4 months, choosing Diego over our marriage, choosing lies over honesty, choosing her own selfish desires over our shared commitment and future together. She'd had countless opportunities to come clean, to address our marital problems honestly, to end our relationship with dignity rather than betrayal. Instead, she'd chosen to manipulate me into feeling guilty for suspecting her obvious affair, demanding that I apologize to the man she was cheating with while using our shared money to fund her secret romantic life. The level of calculated cruelty required for that kind of systematic deception was beyond anything I could ever forgive or forget, regardless of how much I'd loved the woman I thought she was. The next several weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, asset division, and the strange process of untangling a shared life that had been built on lies and false promises. Victoria continued attempting various manipulation tactics through mutual friends and family members, painting herself as a confused woman who'd made mistakes but still loved me deeply and deserved another chance to prove her commitment to our marriage. She sent long emotional letters describing her regret and outlining detailed plans for rebuilding our relationship through counseling, lifestyle changes, and complete transparency about her daily activities. She had family members call me to describe how devastated she was, how she'd learned from her mistakes, how she'd cut all contact with Diego and was committed to earning back my trust through actions rather than empty words. But I'd learned something important about myself during those months of being systematically deceived and manipulated. I wasn't the kind of man who could rebuild a life with someone who demonstrated such calculated cruelty and complete disregard for my emotional well-being. Every promise she made now had been available to her before she chose to have an affair. Every commitment to honesty and transparency should have been automatic within our marriage, rather than emergency measures deployed after being caught. 6 months later, our divorce was finalized with a clean division of assets and no ongoing financial obligations between us. Victoria had to find her own apartment, her own job that paid enough to support her new lifestyle, and face the social consequences of being known in our community community as someone who destroyed a good marriage through systematic adultery and deception. The house felt empty at first, filled with reminders of the life we'd built together and the future we'd planned before everything was destroyed by her choices. But gradually, that emptiness transformed into something else. Freedom from constant suspicion, relief from the exhausting effort of pretending everything was normal while my marriage crumbled around me, and the peace that comes from knowing that the person sharing your home is actually the person they claim to be. A year after our divorce, I started dating again, tentatively at first, then with more confidence as I learned to trust my judgment about people's character and intentions. The experience of being systematically deceived had made me more cautious, more observant of inconsistencies between words and actions, but it had also taught me what genuine honesty and transparency looked like in contrast to Victoria's manipulative performance. I met Carmen at a volunteer event for a local literacy program, where we were both helping adults improve their reading skills. She was a librarian with the infectious laugh and a refreshing directness about her thoughts and feelings that was the complete opposite of Victoria's calculated manipulations. When Carmen said she was tired, she actually looked tired. When she said she loved something, her genuine enthusiasm was obvious. When she made plans, she kept them without elaborate excuses or mysterious changes. Building a relationship based on actual trust rather than blind faith was a revelation that changed how I understood love and commitment. Carmen and I could discuss problems directly instead of hiding behind lies and manipulation tactics. We could make decisions together instead of one person secretly pursuing their own agenda while deceiving the other. We could plan a future based on shared values and mutual respect rather than hoping the other person would eventually become honest about their true intentions. 2 years after meeting Carmen, I proposed to her in the same park where Victoria and I had gotten engaged years earlier. But this time, the moment felt solid and real, rather than built on false promises and hidden agendas. Carmen's tears of joy were genuine rather than calculated. Her excitement about our future together was based on actual knowledge of who I was, rather than some fictional version she'd constructed in her mind. Our wedding was everything Victoria and I had never achieved. Honest, joyful, surrounded by people who actually supported our relationship instead of secretly undermining it. When Carmen and I exchanged vows, I understood for the first time what it meant to promise your life to someone who was actually present in the relationship rather than secretly planning their exit strategy or maintaining backup options. The best revenge against someone who systematically betrayed your trust isn't elaborate schemes designed to hurt them in return. It's building something better with someone who actually deserves your love and commitment, someone who chooses you every day instead of looking for something more exciting or convenient behind your back. Victoria had wanted the thrill of an affair, the excitement of deception, the drama of maintaining a double life while manipulating everyone around her. What she got was the natural consequence of those choices: divorce, social embarrassment, financial struggles, and the knowledge that she'd destroyed something good for temporary excitement that ultimately meant nothing to the man who'd used her for entertainment while she was married. Meanwhile, I got something infinitely more valuable: a real relationship based on truth, respect, and genuine commitment rather than lies, manipulation, and systematic betrayal. Sometimes when I'm having coffee with Carmen on our back porch, watching her tend to the garden she planted in our yard, I think about that morning when Victoria demanded I apologize to Diego for suspecting their innocent friendship. In a strange way, I'm grateful for that moment because it revealed the truth about who she really was and what our marriage had actually become. Without Diego's accidentally honest phone call, I might have spent years more being manipulated and deceived while Victoria maintained her elaborate double life at my expense. Victoria had made her choice to prioritize temporary excitement over permanent commitment, lies over truth, manipulation over honesty. I'd made the choice to prioritize building something real with someone who actually wanted to be there, someone who chose me every day instead of looking for better options while keeping me as a backup plan. We both got exactly what we chose, and I wouldn't trade places with her for anything in the world. The woman who demanded I apologize for catching her in an affair learned that actions have consequences, that systematic deception eventually gets exposed, and that some choices can't be undone regardless of how much you regret them after facing the results. The man who'd been naive enough to trust his wife's lies about innocent friendship learned that sometimes the most devastating betrayal can lead to the greatest blessing if you're wise enough to recognize the opportunity hidden within the crisis. In the end, Victoria's betrayal didn't destroy me. It freed me to find something better than I'd ever imagined possible, and that's the best revenge of all.